In 2025, a cartoon about a foul-mouthed little mountain town mocked the president so hard that the real White House fired back with an official statement. A government answering a cartoon. And that cartoon has been doing this for almost 30 years, picking off whatever the whole world was obsessed with that week. Hybrid cars, Apple, photo filters, the rules about what people are allowed to say, online trolls, the new machine that writes your text for you. Most people think South Park just chases the headlines. That misses what it has been quietly doing the entire time. Every fad it tore apart was only a costume, and underneath every single one sat the same small handful of human weaknesses. The need to be admired, the fear of being criticized, the love of controlling everyone else. 9 cases, 20 years, one argument that ties them all together, and by the end the show will look completely different. Welcome to East Park, let's begin. The smell of being right. By the time South Park reached its 10th season in 2006, the show had been on the air for close to 10 years, and Trey Parker and Matt Stone had locked onto the trick that would keep it alive for decades. The first few seasons ran mostly on shock. Little kids swore, a quiet mountain town turned out to be packed with broken adults, and the laughs came from watching cartoon children do things cartoon children were never meant to do. Somewhere in the middle of the show's life, the aim got steadier and meaner, in a smarter way. The writers began studying how ordinary people behaved out in the real world, then handed that same behavior, almost untouched, to the people of South Park. The targets stopped being monsters. They turned into neighbors, parents, plain adults doing plain things, pushed a step or two past normal until the behavior finally showed what it really was underneath. The episode that captures this better than almost any other is Smug Alert. It first aired on March 29th, 2006 as the second episode of the 10th season, and the show around it was confident and firing on all cylinders. From the outside, the episode reads as a silly half hour about cars. Sit with it a little longer, and it becomes the seed of something the show would dig up again and again across the next 20 years. The strange way a good deed can rot into a hunger to be admired for it. The trouble starts with Kyle's father, Gerald. Gerald buys a hybrid car. Out in the real world, a hybrid is just a car built to burn less fuel and put out less pollution, which is a plainly decent thing to want. In the show, the car carries the name Toyonda Pius, an obvious jab at the Toyota Prius, the one hybrid almost everyone could name back then. The second Gerald owns it, he turns into a different man. He starts speaking with his eyes shut, the way a person does when he believes every word leaving his mouth is wisdom. He cruises around making sure the whole town sees what he drives. He slaps fake tickets on his neighbors, scolding them for failing to love the planet the way he now does. The car came bundled with something he wanted even more than clean air, a fresh, shiny reason to feel better than everyone around him. The episode hangs its biggest joke on one disgusting habit. In this story, smug people love the smell of their own farts. Gerald breathes his in and nearly enjoys them, and his old friend Randy notices the change in him almost at once. The gag sounds like pure potty humor, and it works fine as exactly that, but it is also doing careful work behind the laugh. A man who enjoys the smell of his own farts is a man who has quietly decided that nothing he produces could possibly stink. He can do no wrong in his own mind. Every choice he makes comes out smelling sweet to him, for the simple reason that it came from him. Gerald soon decides that South Park is too dim and backward to deserve a family as forward-thinking as his, so he packs everyone up and moves to San Francisco. Stan is crushed because Kyle is his best friend and now Kyle is gone. Hoping to win him back, Stan writes a song to talk the whole town into buying hybrids, the plan being that a greener South Park might tempt Kyle's family to come home. The song catches on, hybrids fly off the lots, and the moment South Park fills up with them, the town begins pumping out its own thick supply of the same invisible gas the show calls smug. San Francisco, meanwhile, gets drawn as a city stuffed wall to wall with people so pleased with themselves that strolling around sniffing their own farts is treated as a normal afternoon. The joke goes one step darker with the children there, who are shown drinking and taking drugs just to survive living with parents this unbearable. On top of all that, the real actor George Clooney shows up as a cartoon of himself to deliver a grand award show speech, the kind soaked in patting himself on the back, and it spews out a fat cloud of smug all its own. 3 clouds form, one over a smug South Park, one over a smug San Francisco, and one off that single swollen celebrity speech. They slide toward one another like storm systems crawling across a weather map. When they finally collide, they whip up a massive smug storm, a disaster the show cheerfully names global laming, bending the real term global warming into a punchline. San Francisco is flattened. The pollution made of pure self-importance ends up far more destructive than any car exhaust ever could be, and Cartman, who had been overjoyed enjoyed the day Kyle left town, discovers that picking on Butters brings him no joy at all, since Butters just agrees with every insult thrown his way. So Cartman hauls himself all the way to San Francisco to rescue Kyle, not out of any love for him, but because life turns boring without someone to stand over and feel bigger than. Even Cartman, in his own twisted way, is chasing the same feeling Gerald is. The smartest move in the whole episode is turning smug into weather. Smugness is a feeling. It lives deep inside a person and cannot be seen, weighed, or pointed at. By making it a gas with a color, the show drags that hidden feeling out into the open air, where it can be tracked, mapped, and finally blown up into a storm big enough to wipe out a city. Once the feeling has a body, the joke has room to grow as huge as the writers please, and they keep a perfectly straight face the entire time it swells. The small touches around the edges land because they are so exact. The eyes closed speeches, the fart sniffing, the smug little tickets left under windshield wipers. Anyone who has ever met a certain kind of person recognizes every single beat. Casting the genuine George Clooney to voice a puffed up version of himself sharpens the blade even further, because a real famous man agreed to stand in as the very thing the episode is making fun of. What matters most is the part the show flatly refuses to attack. It never claims hybrids are bad. It never claims caring about the earth is foolish. Burning less gas is good. Pollution is a real problem worth solving. The episode walks straight past all of that and aims somewhere narrower and far harder to admit out loud. Its target is the exact moment a person takes a good choice and turns it into proof that he is a finer human being than the folks beside him, and then needs those folks to stand there and witness the proof. Across the entire story, Gerald never gets worse at helping the planet. He only gets worse to be around. The harm he causes by the end has nothing to do with his car. It pours out of his certainty that he is better than everybody. A certainty grown so thick that it poisons the very air the town breathes. The word smug existed long before this episode aired. What the half hour managed to do was bolt that word to a picture so sticky that a whole generation now hears it and instantly sees a man driving with his eyes closed, happily breathing himself in. The joke has also aged in a rare and useful direction. Most comedy grows weaker as the years roll on and the world it laughed at fades away. This one grew stronger. Back in 2006, showing off about your own goodness mostly happened face to face, or on a stage, or in a magazine. A handful of years later, phones and social media handed nearly everyone alive a stage of their own, and announcing your good deeds to a watching crowd became a daily habit for millions of people. The image of a whole town choking to death on a cloud of its own self-satisfaction stopped looking like wild cartoon nonsense and started reading like an honest weather forecast for the years ahead. The reason smugness creeps into a person is plain enough that the show never bothers to spell it out. Doing a good thing feels good. Being praised for a good thing feels even better. For some people, that second feeling slowly takes over the whole operation, until the praise becomes the real prize, and the good deed shrinks down into nothing more than a tool for fishing more praise out of everyone watching. The recycling, the diet, the cause, the clean and careful choice, any of them can quietly flip from a thing a person does into a thing a person performs. Gerald is simply that flip, drawn large enough that nobody in the audience can miss it happening. The year it landed matters just as much. In 2006, hybrids were still fairly new and far from cheap, and the writers picked the Prius for a sharp reason. It was the hybrid a person could spot from clear across a parking lot. Owning the easy-to-recognize one told the whole world something about its driver before the driver opened his mouth. At the very same time, plenty of Hollywood stars were loud and proud about saving the planet while flying around on private jets that did more damage in one trip than a family car manages in years. The episode jabs that soft spot on purpose. A person can lecture the entire world about pollution from a stage he only reached by private jet, and somehow never feel the crack running through the middle of his own message. That wide gap between what a person preaches and how a person actually lives is a huge part of where the laugh comes from. Kids watching in 2006 mostly howled at the farts and moved right along. The deeper ideas soaked in slowly, the way the show's best ideas tend to. A child raised on this episode picked up a quiet little skill without ever noticing it happen. The ability to feel the difference between someone who is simply doing right and someone who is putting on a whole show of doing right, and to trust the first kind a good deal more than the second. By the time that same child grew up holding a phone stuffed with apps built almost entirely for performing goodness out loud in public, the suspicion was already wired in and waiting. The cartoon got there years ahead of the technology. This is the cleanest early look at the single move the entire show is built around. The trend sitting in front of the camera, the hybrid car, is only a costume. The thing the show is truly pointing at stands quietly behind that costume, and it is far older than any car or any phone or any app. The plain human itch to be seen as better than the people standing nearby. Cars come and go. Trends come and go. That itch never once leaves the room. Every case still ahead in this video runs on the very same hidden engine. Peel away whatever happened to be in the news that week, and the same unflattering little truth about people is sitting right there underneath it, waiting to be found. Smug-Alert just happens to make that truth the easiest one in the whole run to smell. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Smug is a thing a person pushes outward, pressing it onto everyone within range. The next case spins the lens around the other way. Instead of a grown man who needs the world to watch him, the show locks onto four boys who slowly stop watching the world at all, and starts asking what happens when the people who build modern life finally learn how to make something a person can sink into so deeply that climbing back out stops feeling like an option. Section 2. The game that ate their lives. 2 years before this episode aired, a company called Blizzard had put out a game called World of Warcraft, and by 2006, it had quietly grown into one of the biggest things on the planet. The game drops a player into a giant online world, where millions of people are logged in at the same time, each one steering a fantasy hero through quests and battles and an endless list of small tasks. A knight, a wizard, a hunter. The more a hero does, the stronger that hero becomes. The thing that makes the game so hard to put down is also the simplest thing in the world. There is always one more task to finish, one more level to reach, one more reward hanging just out of arm's reach. People did not log into World of Warcraft for an hour. They logged in for years. South Park aims straight at this in the 8th episode of its 10th season, Make Love, Not Warcraft, which first aired on October 4th, 2006. From the first scene, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny are already deep into the game. They sit down expecting a normal night of questing and run face first into a problem the game was never built to handle. A silent, heavyset grown man keeps hunting down their characters and killing them on sight, over and over, for no reason beyond wrecking everyone's fun. In the world of online games, there is a name for a person like this. A griefer. Someone who plays only to ruin the game for everybody around him. This particular griefer has gone further than anyone thought a person could. He has been logged in nearly every hour of every day for a year and a half, ever since the game first came out, and he has climbed to a level so high that the game's own rules no longer reach him. He can kill not only other players, but even the staff whose whole job is keeping order. One of the people who run the game sums him up in a single flat, brutal line. Whoever this is, he has absolutely no life. Faced with a monster nobody can stop, the boys decide somebody has to try, and that somebody is them. They cannot beat him at their current strength, so they land on the only plan available to anyone in a game like this. They have to get stronger. And the way a player gets stronger in this kind of game is by doing the same dull little task again and again, thousands of times, for as long as it takes. When Cartman rallies the group, one boy, Clyde, says he wants no part of it and backs out, and Cartman writes him off as a quitter. The rest of them commit. What follows is the heart of the episode, and it is genuinely hard to watch in the best possible way. For the next 2 months, the four boys play the game 21 hours a day. They stay in the same chairs, in the same room, killing weak little animals in the game's forest on a loop to slowly build their heroes up. A loud, triumphant song called Live to Win blasts over the top of it all while they grind away. And as the weeks crawl by, their bodies come apart, their skin goes pale, they grow heavy and slow, their hair turns long and greasy, their faces break out in sores, and real meals get replaced by frozen snacks and energy drinks. Cartman refuses to get up even to use the bathroom, so his mother stands patiently beside him holding a bedpan. Far into the final fight, 17 hours deep, Kyle's hand locks up from all the clicking, a real injury that comes from making the same tiny motion too many times, and Cartman has to rub cream into it so his friend can keep going. The boys are turning, slowly and completely, into the exact thing they set out to destroy. To beat the man with no life, they are busy throwing away their own. A small, sweet contrast sits off to the side of all this. When the subject of the game comes up, Butter says he does not even play it. He plays a gentle little game about a cute kitty living on an island instead. He is the one kid who never gets pulled under, and the episode lets that pass almost without comment. A quiet reminder that the trap only closes on the people who step into it. The people who run the game eventually notice the boys, mostly because their heroes are growing at a speed that only makes sense if the kids behind them have no lives left either. They decide to help. Locked away in their offices is a weapon so powerful that it was pulled out of the game before a single player could ever touch it, kept safe on a tiny memory stick, waiting. A man in their accounting department had even predicted, long before, that one day a group of heroes worthy of the weapon would finally appear. The staff rushed to put it in Stan's hands. The handoff falls to the least likely person in the whole story. Stan's dad, Randy, has recently gotten curious about the game and is hopelessly, embarrassingly new at it. Logging onto a display computer at a Best Buy store, he steers his weak little starter character straight into the middle of the battle to pass the mighty weapon to his son. He fumbles it. He does not know how to hand an item to another player, and the precious seconds he burns figuring it out leave him wide open. The griefer cuts him down. Even so, he manages to get the weapon to Stan first, and his clumsy, doomed little rescue is the thing that finally turns the fight. Holding the weapon at last, Stan tears into the griefer and strips away his defenses. Kyle and Kenny pile on. Cartman finishes the job by swinging a giant hammer down onto the man's head. All across the game, players who had spent months hiding from this monster come pouring out of the shadows to cheer, treating the four boys as heroes who saved their entire world. Then comes the line that quietly flips the whole episode inside out. The fight is won. The monster is dead. Stan, blinking, asks what they are supposed to do now. Cartman answers without a beat of hesitation. Now they can finally play the game. That answer deserves a long, hard look. There was never a prize waiting at the finish of all that suffering. Every one of those ruined hours bought the boys exactly one thing, which was the chance to go right back to the very game that had been eating them alive in the first place. The reward for beating the game is simply more game. The finish line they dragged their broken bodies toward turns out to be the same starting line they set off from, and they cannot even see the trap they are standing inside. Cartman is already making cheerful little suggestions about what to build up next. Here's the part most people skip past when they remember this as the funny one with the fat gamer. The griefer is best understood as a warning, a living picture of where this whole road ends. He has no body left worth mentioning, no daylight, no life outside the glow of the screen. And to defeat him, the boys turn into precisely that. The thing they were fighting and the thing they became are one and the same. The only gap between them and him by the final scene is that the boys have not noticed it yet. Part of why the episode hits so hard is that it never feels like a cartoon poking fun at a game from a safe distance. The real company that made World of Warcraft, Blizzard, teamed up with the show and handed over actual footage from the actual game. So when the boys battle inside that world, what fills the screen is the genuine article, the same images real players were staring into every single night. The joke is built straight out of the audience's own world, which is the very reason so many of them saw themselves inside it. The whole idea, in fact, grew from a true story. Someone working at the game company had once used a hidden trick to kill a random player in a single hit, and that small, strange piece of online cruelty bloomed into the unstoppable griefer who can kill anyone he likes. The tale behind the making of the episode might be the most surprising piece of all. The night before it aired, Trey Parker, the man who wrote and directed it, was certain he had made a disaster. He thought it was terrible. He went to the network and begged them to call it off, convinced it would wreck everything the show had spent years building. They aired it anyway. It went on to win an Emmy, one of the top prizes in all of television. And years later, when the show let fans vote on the single best South Park episode ever made, this is the one that came out on top. The half hour its own creator wanted buried turned into one of the most beloved things the show ever produced. Even the people standing closest to a piece of work cannot always tell what they have actually made. The reason the episode reaches so deep is that the pull it describes is real, and it is ancient. Long before there were video games, people have always been drawn to anything that hands out clear goals and quick rewards. Real life moves slowly and rarely makes sense. It almost never stops to tell a person in plain terms that they are winning. A game does exactly that every few minutes. It gives a number that climbs, a bar that fills, a next step that always sits within reach. Each small reward sets off a tiny flicker of good feeling, and the mind quickly learns to chase the next flicker and the next one after that. Whole hours disappear without a sound. The boys are not weak and they are not dumb. They are caught inside something that was built on purpose to be almost impossible to walk away from. The year the episode landed is a big part of why it mattered. Back in 2006, the idea of a grown adult losing months of his life to an online world still struck most people as new and a little frightening. Plenty of parents did not understand it at all. News stories treated game addiction like a strange, far-off problem that only ever happened to some other family's kid. The episode looked the whole thing in the eye and said plainly that this was about to become a normal part of how people lived, and it was right. In the years that followed, the very same hooks that powered World of Warcraft spread into nearly everything a person touches, from phones to apps to feeds that never end, all of them running on that same simple promise of one more reward sitting just ahead. Children watching in 2006 mostly howled at the the bedpan and the sores and moved on with their day. The deeper picture stayed lodged in them in a quieter way. A kid who grew up on this episode walked around afterward carrying a sharp mental image of what it looks like when a screen wins all the way. The long, greasy hair, the dead eyes, the soft, slumped body. The life shrunk down to a single chair in a single room. That image worked like a warning light, easy to spot years later in a roommate, a friend, or a tired face in the bathroom mirror. The cartoon handed an entire generation a clear word picture for a danger the rest of the world was only beginning to take seriously. And here, the same shape from the first section steps forward again, simply dressed in different clothes. The game glowing on the screen is only the costume. The real target standing behind it runs far deeper than any computer ever could. The old human habit of pouring everything a person has into something that feels like winning, while the actual life around them quietly falls to pieces, and never spotting the cost until it is far too late, if they ever spot it at all. The first case was about needing other people to watch you be good. This one reaches somewhere lonelier, into the need for a game to keep whispering that you are getting somewhere, even while you go absolutely nowhere. Different itch, same engine underneath. The trend on display was World of Warcraft. The trap was as old as people have ever been. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. At least the boys climbed into that game with their eyes open and chose to stay. The next case turns to a stranger kind of trap, the sort a person falls into without ever choosing it, by tapping a single button on a screen, agreeing to a wall of words nobody ever reads, and handing a giant company a power over their own body that they never once knew they were giving away. Section 3. The words nobody reads. By 2011, a new gadget had swept across the country and planted itself in nearly everyone's hands. Apple's iPad had arrived the year before, a flat glass tablet that did almost everything a computer could do, and within months, it had turned into the thing to own. People lined up for it, people showed it off. Owning one said something about a person before they opened their mouth, and not owning one started to feel like being left behind. South Park opened its 15th season by walking straight up to all of this and pressing on the part everyone pretends not to see. The episode, called Human Sentai Pad, first aired on April 27th, 2011, as the very first episode of the season. On the surface, it is a wild story about Apple. Underneath, it is about something far quieter and far more uncomfortable. The giant wall of words a person agrees to without ever reading it, and the power they hand over the moment they tap the button. The trouble begins, oddly enough, with the most ordinary thing in the world. Kyle updates the software on his Apple device. Before the update will run, a long agreement appears on the screen, the kind that fills page after page after page with rules and permissions written in dense, dull language. Kyle does what almost every human being on Earth does. He scrolls to the bottom without reading a single line and taps the button marked Agree. In the world of the episode, this turns out to make him a rare and marked man, because everyone else, it seems, actually read the whole thing. His friends are baffled that he did not. They claim they read all of it, every word, every page. Soon after, quiet men in dark clothes show up looking for Kyle. They explain calmly and politely that everything they are about to do to him is completely allowed because he agreed to it when he tapped that button. Kyle runs. He hides at his father Gerald's law office, hoping a lawyer can protect him. The men follow, knock Gerald flat with a jolt of electricity, grab Kyle, and haul him away. He wakes up locked in a cage beside two strangers, a Japanese man named Junichi Takayama and a woman, both of whom made the same mistake he did. None of them read the fine print. All three are now, by the wording of an agreement they never looked at, the legal property of a company. What the company plans to build out of them is where the episode earns its grotesque name. Apple, led by its calm and visionary boss Steve Jobs, is about to reveal a brand new product, and the product is people. The idea is borrowed from a notorious horror movie in which human beings are stitched together end to end into a single connected chain, forced to share one body. The new gadget takes that nightmare and bolts a tablet onto it. A line of living people, sewn together, wired up, turned into a machine that can browse the internet and send email through the bodies of the very humans trapped inside it. They unveil it on a bright stage with music and applause, the same way a real company would show off a shiny new phone. The crowd cheers. Nobody in the room seems troubled that the device is made of suffering people, because the people agreed to it, and an agreement is an agreement. One small moment in the episode shines like a warning lamp. Butters, sitting at a computer, actually does the thing none of the others did. He reads the agreement out loud. The words he reads describe in flat, plain language that by tapping agree, a person gives the company permission to sew their mouth to the rear of another customer and join them into one one shared body. Butters takes this in, thinks about it for a second, and calmly chooses the other button, the one marked decline. He is the only character who reads, understands, and refuses, and the show lets that pass almost without fanfare. The simplest, most obvious act of caution in the entire story belongs to the dim, sweet kid everyone underestimates. While Kyle is trapped in the machine, the episode runs a second story alongside the first, and the two rhyme with each other in a way that is easy to miss. Cartman, like every other kid, is desperate to own the new tablet. The problem is that he does not have one, and when his friends catch him pretending, the humiliation is too much for him to bear. His mother, Leanne, offers to buy him a cheaper tablet made by another company, a Toshiba, instead of the pricey Apple one he wants. Cartman responds by throwing a screaming public tantrum at a Best Buy store, twisting an ordinary moment between a mother and son into something monstrous. He chooses words designed to sound, to every stranger within earshot, like an accusation of a terrible crime, even though all his mother did was suggest a less expensive gift. He is not telling the truth. He is performing a story, loudly, because he has learned that a loud enough victim gets what he wants. The performance climbs all the way to television. Cartman appears on a daytime talk show hosted by a famous man named Dr. Phil, and repeats his ugly, false accusation against his mother in front of a studio audience. And the audience does exactly what he counted on. They take his side. They never question his story or check whether it is true. They simply believe the loud crying boy over the quiet protesting woman, because his version is the one with more drama in it. As a reward for the sympathy he has stolen, Cartman is handed the first one of the new devices ever made, the very machine built out of Kyle and the two strangers. He is overjoyed. He gets to own a gadget assembled from living, hurting people, and the only thing he feels about it is delight. The endings of both stories arrive together. Gerald, working as the lawyer he is, finds the loophole. Because Kyle is a child, his agreement can be wiped away if his father signs himself up with the company and creates a family account, and so Gerald does it, surrendering himself to undo what his son carelessly accepted. The strange company staff perform a series of bizarre little ceremonies to make it official. Steve Jobs resists at first, then gives in when Gerald appeals to whatever decency he has left. Kyle and the two others are unhooked and taken away to be pulled apart again, which means Cartman's brand new prize is yanked out of his hands. Robbed of the device he was thrilled to own, Cartman flies into a rage and screams at the sky, hurling the same ugly accusation at God that he had hurled at his mother. A bolt of lightning answers him instantly. The final shot is Cartman lying broken in a hospital bed, wrapped in casts, bruised and weeping, while his mother sits beside him, calmly flipping through a magazine, utterly unbothered by the state of him. The smartest thing the episode does is take an idea everyone already half knows and force it to become real and physical. The phrase a person clicks past without thinking, the promise that they have read and agreed to everything, is invisible. It carries no weight in the moment. By turning that empty click into a horror made of actual human bodies, the show gives the idea a shape that cannot be ignored. Building the gadget on top of a real and infamous horror movie sharpens the blade even further, because it borrows a thing the audience already finds sickening and ties it directly to the most boring, harmless act imaginable, the act of tapping a button to make a pop-up go away. The calm, polished product launch, run by a calm, polished man, drives the point home. The most monstrous thing in the story is presented as ordinary business, because legally, that is exactly what it is. The real horror underneath the cartoon is that none of it could be argued against. Kyle did agree. The company is telling the truth when they say so. He had the words right in front of him, the same words Butters read aloud, and he waved them away. The episode runs entirely on something true about modern life, which is that people hand enormous power to enormous companies every single day by accepting deals they never read, and that if those companies ever chose to use that power against them, the people would have almost nothing to stand on. They said yes. The gadget made of bodies is simply the loudest possible way of showing what yes can mean. The reason nobody reads these agreements is worth sitting with, because the show understands it perfectly. The documents are built to go unread. They are long on purpose, dull on purpose, and written in stiff, twisting language on purpose, so that any normal person scrolling through gives up within seconds and clicks the button just to make the wall of words disappear. On top of that, people trust. A big, respected, beloved company surely would not slip something something terrible into the fine print, the thinking goes, so why bother checking? And underneath the trust sits the simplest force of all, the plain hunger for the shiny new thing, which makes a person willing to agree to almost anything, if agreeing is the last step between them and the gadget they crave. Kyle's careless tap and Cartman's screaming tantrum are two faces of the same coin. One person gives away his rights because reading is boring. The other gives away his soul because wanting is loud. The year this landed is a huge part of why it bit so hard. Around 2010 and 2011, Apple was at the absolute peak of its power, and its product reveals were treated almost like religious events, with crowds hanging on every word from a man many people genuinely worshipped. At the very same time, a quiet worry was beginning to grow in the back of people's minds about just how much of themselves they were handing to the companies behind their gadgets. How much information, how much access, how much trust, all of it surrendered through agreements no human ever actually read. The episode reached into that uneasy feeling and dragged it out into the open, dressed up as a horror story, and refused to let the audience look away from their own clicking finger. Children watching in 2011 mostly laughed at the gross device and the lightning bolt. The deeper idea settled into them slowly, the way the show's sharpest ideas tend to. A kid who grew up on this episode carried away a small, sticky understanding that the button-marked agree is a real promise with real teeth, even when it feels like nothing at all. That understanding worked like a tiny splinter of caution, surfacing years later in the half-second pause before accepting some new app's wall of rules. Most of them still tapped agree without reading, exactly like Kyle. The difference is that some of them at least felt a flicker of the question first, and the cartoon is part of why that flicker exists. Here, the pattern that has run through every case so far steps forward once more, simply wearing a new outfit. The trend on display, the Apple craze, and the magic tablet everyone needed to own is only the costume. The thing the show is truly aiming at runs far deeper and far older than any gadget. The readiness of people to hand over control and trust to a larger power without ever looking at what they are giving away. Partly because reading is hard and boring, and partly because the prize on the other side is so shiny that caution feels like a waste of time. The first case was about needing other people to watch you be good. The second was about pouring your whole life into a finish line that does not exist. This one is about signing away power over your own self with a flick of the thumb, eyes closed, simply to keep the shiny thing coming. 3 different soft spots in a person, the same engine humming away underneath all 3. The show keeps changing the trend on the surface and keeps hitting the exact same nerve below it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Kyle at least had the words sitting right there in front of him and chose to ignore them. The next case looks at a trap with no agreement to read at all, a quiet tool that slips into ordinary pictures and slowly rewrites what an entire generation believes a real human body is even supposed to look like, until people start measuring themselves against something that was never real to begin with. Section 4, the girl who was right and lost anyway. By 2013, the way people looked at pictures had changed completely. Phones with sharp cameras sat in nearly every pocket, and apps like Instagram and Facebook had turned everyday life into a steady river of photos shared with everyone a person knew. Riding alongside those photos came a tool that had existed for years but was now spreading everywhere. A kind of photo editing software, the most famous of which was called Photoshop. The program lets a person reach into a picture and quietly change it, shrink a waist, smooth out skin, erase a spot, stretch a leg, sharpen a jaw. The picture still looks like an honest photograph of a real human being. It simply shows a version of that human who never actually existed. South Park closed out its 17th season by aiming straight at all of this, in an episode called The Hobbit, which first aired on December 11th, 2013. It is one of the saddest things the show has ever made, and every bit of that sadness is there on purpose. It opens at cheerleading practice, where the team captain, Wendy, notices that one of the girls, Lisa Berger, seems shy and low and unsure of herself. Learning that Lisa has a crush on Butters, Wendy offers what sounds like warm, helpful advice. Ask him on a date, she says. It will lift your confidence. Lisa gathers her nerve and asks Butters at lunch. Butters turns her down without a flicker of kindness, and the reason he gives is that she is, in his word, too fat for him. Wendy is furious and confronts him. Butters, with his usual cheerful cluelessness, explains that he simply prefers gorgeous women, and he points to his celebrity crush, a famous television star named Kim Kardashian, as exactly the kind of woman he wants. This sets Wendy off completely. She tells Butters something true and deeply unwelcome. The images of that star he has fallen for are not real, she says. They have been heavily edited, and in the show's blunt cartoon cartoon joke, Wendy insists that in real life, the woman has the body of a hobbit, a short, stout little storybook creature, and that pictures like these exist in part to make ordinary girls feel terrible about their own bodies. For saying this out loud, Wendy is the one who lands in trouble. Butters runs and reports her to the school counselor, Mr. Mackey, and Wendy gets dragged into his office. Rather than listen to her, Mackey waves the whole thing away by deciding she must simply be jealous. That single word, jealous, then trails Wendy for the rest of the episode like a smell she cannot wash off. Every time she points at the truth, somebody answers that she is only bitter, only envious, just a less pretty girl lashing out at prettier ones. The grown-ups say it. The boys say it. Before long, even the local news says it. Determined to prove her point, Wendy sets up a demonstration. She sits Butters down and right in front of his eyes edits a photo of Lisa Berger, the same shy girl he just rejected, until the picture shows a slim, polished, magazine-ready version of her. The lesson is meant to be obvious. See, this is fake, this is what the tool does, the real Lisa is the one standing here in the room. The lesson lands in precisely the wrong place. Butters stares at the edited photo and falls head over heels for it. He becomes certain that this is what Lisa truly looks like, even though Wendy made every change in front of him, even though the actual Lisa is standing right there. The fake picture beats the real girl, and it beats her in an instant. From there, the whole thing sweeps through the school like a fever. Word spreads that an edited picture can win a boy's attention, and soon, every girl in the grade wants the same treatment. They line up to have their photos reshaped into slim, flawless, grown-up images, then post them for the boys to admire. And the boys fall for all of it. They go crazy over the pictures glowing on their screens, while ignoring the real girl standing right beside them. One boy, Clyde, ends up dating Lisa, and walks around proudly showing his friends the edited photo of his girlfriend, instead of introducing them to the actual person on his arm. The picture has become more real, to everyone involved, than the human being it was supposed to be of. The girls themselves start chasing the fake standard too, dragging their real bodies to the gym to try to force them into the shape the pictures had promised. Running alongside all this is one of the strangest and funniest threads the show ever wrote. The musician Kanye West, drawn as a cartoon version of himself, simply cannot accept Wendy's claim that his fiancée looks anything like a hobbit. He sets out over and over to prove the world wrong about her. The joke is that every single time he opens his mouth to defend her, he accidentally stacks up more evidence for the very thing he is fighting against. He describes the family's reality show, without hearing what he is saying, as a program about short, loud little people living in a fantasy world. The harder he pushes back on the idea, the more he seems to prove it, and bit by bit he starts to doubt himself. The news gets pulled in too, and the show uses the broadcasters to make one of its sharpest points. When Wendy takes her message against edited photos public, the local news does not stop to check whether she is right. They accuse her as well of being jealous. The episode is quietly pointing at something real and ugly here. The entire business of selling beauty, the magazines, the ads, the endless products, leans on these impossible images, which means the people who make money from them have every reason to shout down anyone who calls the images fake. A little girl telling the truth is bad for business, so the machine slaps the label of bitter on her and rolls on. Everything tips over at the ending, where the episode stops being funny and becomes something that stays lodged in a person for a long time. Kanye, finally unable to keep lying to himself, breaks down. Late at night, he sneaks into Wendy's house and, in tears, reads her a small story about an ugly little hobbit whose deepest wish was to be beautiful, a wish that could never come true until the day Photoshop was invented. It is a strange, broken, oddly gentle moment. And then arrives the part that lands like a soft punch to the stomach. Wendy, the single person in the whole story who saw the truth plainly and fought for it the entire way through, gives up. Worn down, alone, and beaten, she sits at her own computer, opens a photo of herself, and edits it, smoothing and slimming her own image until it matches the fake standard she spent the entire episode trying to tear apart. She sends the edited version to her classmates. The screen shows a single click of the mouse, and the episode ends right there, on a quiet, total defeat. That ending is the whole point of the episode, and it is a brutal one. All the way through, the show is not truly angry at the editing tool itself. A computer program is just a computer program. What the show burns with anger at is the agreement an entire culture has silently made. The unspoken deal that the fake image will be treated as the real standard, so that actual human bodies, the ones people are actually born into and have to live inside, begin to feel like errors. Once everyone has agreed to believe the fake, a person who refuses to fake themselves does not get to keep their pride. They simply lose. Wendy is right about every part of it. She is right that the pictures are edited, right that they wound people, right that the world is fooling itself. And being right fight does not rescue her. It does not even slow the tide. The only two doors the episode leaves open to her are to stand alone and be called bitter forever, or to surrender and join the lie. She walks through the second door because by the end of it, that is the only path left that lets her belong. Placing Wendy at the center of all this is a much sharper choice than it first looks. The show normally runs on the four boys, and Wendy spends most of the series off at the edges. Handing her the entire episode and then handing her a loss gives the story a weight it never could have carried any other way. The running joke of everyone calling her jealous does real work too. It shows exactly how a true thing gets buried in the real world, because a true thing rarely gets defeated by argument. It gets waved away as nothing more than the bitterness of someone who secretly wishes they were prettier. The Kanye thread keeps the laughs coming while it pounds the same nail in the background, since his every desperate denial proves Wendy more correct. And the ending shuts the door on every comfort. No triumphant music swells, no last-second lesson gets learned, no crowd comes around to Wendy's side. There is only a tired girl and a mouse click. The show trusts the silence to carry the meaning, and it does. What makes the episode dig so deep is that the ache it describes lives inside almost everyone. People want to be found beautiful, they want to be wanted, and the human mind cannot stop measuring itself against the images it sees all day long, holding its own face and body up next to the faces and bodies on the screen. When those images were at least honest photographs of real people, the comparison was unfair, but still possible. Once the images became edited into shapes no living person actually has, the comparison turned into a contest that can never be won, because the thing on the screen does not exist and never did. A person ends up straining toward a target that was painted onto glass. The shame that follows is no sign of weakness. It is the plain, predictable result of being told all day and every day that the normal human body is somehow the wrong one. Timing matters enormously here. In 2013, the family Wendy keeps pointing at sat right at the very top of fame, their images plastered across every magazine and screen, while the tools for editing photos were spilling out of professional studios and into the hands of ordinary people. Phone apps that could smooth a face or trim a waist with a single tap were just starting to appear. The episode caught the whole thing at the exact moment it was about to burst wide open. Within just a few short years, editing your own pictures before posting them would stop being a special trick and become a plain daily habit for hundreds of millions of people, baked directly into the apps everyone carried. The fake image Wendy fought so hard against did not stay locked away inside celebrity magazines. It climbed into every pocket and became the ordinary, everyday face people show the world. Children watching in 2013 mostly grabbed the simple lesson sitting on the surface. The perfect pictures are fake, so do not believe them. The harder and truer lesson sat underneath, and it is the one the ending actually teaches. Knowing the pictures are fake does nothing to protect a person from them. Wendy knew, and Wendy still ended up editing herself in the final shot. The generation that grew up on this episode walked straight into a world built almost entirely out of edited pictures of one another, and many of them learned, the slow and painful way, that understanding the lie and escaping the lie are two completely different things. The cartoon told them the truth, and then, with that last quiet click, warned them that the truth alone might not be enough to save them. Here, the pattern that has run through all the earlier cases shows up yet again, dressed in fresh clothes. The trend on the surface, the editing tool and the celebrity photos and the flood of posted pictures, is only the costume. The thing the show is truly reaching for runs far older than any computer. The deep human hunger to be seen as beautiful and to be wanted, and the way people will reshape themselves and sometimes nearly erase themselves to win that approval from others. The first case was about needing people to watch you be good. The second was about pouring your whole life into a finish line that was never there. The third was about signing away your power without looking. This one is about remaking your own face to fit a picture that was never real, simply because everyone around you agreed to pretend that it was. 4 different soft spots inside a person, and the same engine humming away beneath each one. This time though, the show slips in a colder note than usual. Sometimes the person who sees clearly does not get saved by seeing clearly. Sometimes being right is only a lonelier way to lose. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Wendy at least was up against a pressure that hid inside pictures and dressed itself up as a question about beauty. The next case brings a pressure that does not hide at all. It walks straight through the front door of the school wearing dark sunglasses, and it arrives carrying a loud and forceful set of rules about what people are now allowed to say, to think, and even to be, fully prepared to punish anyone who dares step across the lines it has drawn. Section Section 5. The Bully Who Came to Save Everyone. By 2015, a loud argument about words was rolling across the country. A movement that people often called being politically correct had grown powerful, and the idea behind it sounded gentle enough on its face. People should be careful with their language, it said, and steer clear of words and jokes that might wound or insult certain groups. A harder edge had grown up around that gentle idea, though. Out on the internet and on college campuses, a person who said the wrong thing could suddenly find themselves swarmed, shamed, and sometimes stripped of a job or a reputation overnight. All of it carried out in the name of kindness. South Park opened its 19th season by walking right into the middle of this storm, and it pulled off something clever. Rather than argue about the rules out loud, it built one single character to stand in for the entire movement, set him loose, and let the audience watch what he actually did. The episode is called Stunning and Brave, and it first aired on September 16th, 2015. The story begins with a sudden change at South Park Elementary. The old principal, a woman named Principal Victoria, is abruptly gone, and a new man arrives to take her place, introducing himself only as PC Principal. He is nothing like what anyone pictures when they imagine a champion of careful, gentle speech. He looks like a college sports star, big, muscled, wearing dark sunglasses indoors, talking in the loud, booming voice of a guy who runs a party house full of rowdy young men. His whole reason for existing is to drag the town into line with the new rules about language. At his very first school assembly, he announces that he looked the town up before arriving and could not believe the terrible things its people had said and done and gotten away with over the years. From that moment forward, he rules through punishment. Say the wrong word and earn yourself detention. When Cartman refers to a man from a sandwich commercial as a spokesman instead of the more careful word spokesperson, PC Principal nearly comes apart at the seams. The real weight of the episode lands on Kyle. Around that time, a famous person named Caitlyn Jenner had recently come out as a transgender woman, which means she had been born and lived as a man for most of her life and was now living openly as a woman. Much of the country celebrated her as brave and as a hero, and she was handed a Courage Award at a large televised sports ceremony. Kyle, asked for his honest opinion, says plainly that he does not think she is a hero, and that being brave about one thing does not by itself make a person a hero or even a good person. He insults no one. He simply declines to repeat the words that everyone around him is repeating, and for that refusal alone, PC Principal slaps him with weeks of detention, and the whole movement turns Kyle into its enemy. PC Principal, as it turns out, belongs to an entire brotherhood of men exactly like himself. They all call one another PC, they move in together into a party house, and they spend their nights throwing loud bashes while policing the way everyone else talks. Once Kyle becomes the movement's target over his comment, these men come after him as part of their group rituals, the cruel initiation game such brotherhoods force on people. They tie him up, torment him, and humiliate him again and again, every bit of it dressed up as teaching him a lesson and turning him into a kinder, more thoughtful person. The kindness movement, when a person watches what it actually does, looks remarkably like a pack of bullies hazing the kid they have decided to hate. Stan's dad, Randy, gets swept into the brotherhood almost by accident. He wanders over to one of their parties, gets pulled into the fun, and before he fully grasps what is happening to him, he has become a member, drinking far too much and slurring out the movement slogans. The next morning, he can barely explain himself to his wife through the fog of his hangover. His new brothers then hand him tasks to prove his loyalty, and one of those tasks is joining in on the torment of Kyle. Randy throws himself into it without much thought, because going along with the popular crowd feels good, and stopping to ask hard questions feels like work. He is the same man who once drove around town feeling superior in his fancy hybrid, simply wearing a new uniform now. Cartman, meanwhile, watches all of it with a scheme already forming in his head. He has been daydreaming about a famous football player named Tom Brady, who at that very moment was tangled up in a cheating scandal involving deflated footballs, and seemed to be sliding out of it without any real punishment. To Cartman, Brady is a hero, a man who breaks the rules and somehow wins anyway. Fired up by that idea, Cartman sets a sneaky trap to bring PC Principal down and get him thrown out. The plan detonates in his own face. Certain words flip PC Principal like a switch, and he beats Cartman so savagely that Cartman ends up in a hospital bed, lying there wrapped in a cast. Cartman is ready to throw in the towel and just agree that he and his friends are bad people. Hearing this, Kyle only digs in harder, more convinced than ever that the whole thing is a fraud. The chaos finally boils over when Cartman, learning that Kyle has become the Brotherhood's favorite punching bag, decides to storm the party house. He does not truly care about protecting Kyle, whose opinions he openly calls bigoted to his face. What he actually wants is a good excuse to be as offensive as humanly possible while pretending it is all for a noble cause. cause. So he launches a wild, over-the-top attack built entirely out of the exact kinds of cruel stereotypes the movement exists to stamp out. A deliberately offensive flood aimed straight at the people who spend their days policing offense. The entire town collapses into bedlam, and then Kyle ends it in the only way the episode will allow him to make the harassment stop, to make the chaos stop. He stands up and publicly declares that he does believe Caitlyn Jenner is a hero, and that she is brave. He says the words, everyone cheers. The town erupts in celebration. A clip from the real-life award ceremony plays over the rejoicing crowd. Peace floods back in. PC Principal keeps his job as the head of the school. Randy becomes a proud, fully sworn-in member of the Brotherhood, and the boys quietly accept that this new way of running the world is not going anywhere. Here is the part that gives the whole episode its bite. Kyle does not change his mind. He gives in. There is a wide canyon between those two things, and the entire episode lives down inside it. Nothing about the movement convinced Kyle of anything at all. No one ever showed him he was wrong, because no one ever once tried. They simply made his life unbearable until saying the approved words finally became less painful than holding out. He surrenders in public while privately believing the exact same thing he believed at the start. The machine did not win an argument. It won obedience, and it could not even tell the difference between the two, because obedience was the only thing it ever actually wanted. This is the very same shape that closed out the photo editing episode, only this time it is louder and angrier. Wendy knew the truth about the fake pictures and edited herself anyway, ground down by a world that had already agreed to the lie. Kyle knows his own honest opinion and stands up to recite the opposite of it, ground down by a crowd that had already settled on the one acceptable answer. Two smart kids, two private truths, two public surrenders. The show keeps circling back to this exact wound. The moment a person stops saying what they really think because the price of honesty has been driven up far too high. The single smartest move in the episode is the shape of PC Principal himself. The show could easily have drawn the face of the movement as a frail, fussy, easily wounded weakling, the way its loudest critics like to picture it. It chose the opposite. It made him a hulking, aggressive, sunglasses-wearing bully, a man who shoves people, screams in their faces, and puts a child in the hospital, all the while insisting he is making the world a gentler place. That one design choice carries the sharpest idea in the whole episode. The new enforcer of sensitivity behaves precisely like the old-fashioned jock who used to stuff smaller kids into lockers. The cause on the surface changed completely. The hunger humming underneath it, the plain love of holding power over other people, and the thrill of deciding what everyone else is allowed to do stayed exactly the same. It even peeks through in the small detail that he and his brothers run themselves like a college party house and haze their newcomers, because the movement handed the same old bullying a shiny new excuse that nobody was allowed to question. A telling piece of history sits behind this character. PC Principal was only ever meant to appear one time. The plan was to bring him in and then kill him off by the end of the episode. Parker and Stone ended up liking him so much and finding him so useful that they kept him around, and he became a permanent fixture on the show for years to come. That decision quietly says something important. A single character built to capture one heated argument of one particular year turned out to have enough life in him to stay sharp and relevant season after season, because the thing he stood for never faded out. It only dug in deeper. What lets the episode reach so far down is that the urge it describes is one of the oldest urges people have. Human beings love to police one another. A real and powerful good feeling comes from being the one who decides what is allowed, from standing above others and correcting them, from belonging to the group that gets to hand out the punishment instead of receiving it. Every age dresses that urge in the language of its own moment. In one century, it wrapped itself in the robes of religion. In another, it waved the flag of patriotism. In 2015, it spoke the soft, caring words of sensitivity and kindness. The words on the outside keep on changing. The private pleasure of the person wielding them never does. The timing of it all was perfect. The episode arrived just as the fight over correct speech was boiling over across the internet and through college campuses, in a moment when a single careless sentence could cost a person everything overnight, and when the line between protecting people and simply bullying them had grown genuinely hard to make out. South Park stepped straight into that heat, and it pulled off something tricky in the process. It took the movement seriously enough to admit that plenty of its goals were decent and worth having, while flatly refusing to pretend that the people enforcing it were as gentle as they kept claiming to be. The show set aside the question of whether the cause was good and trained its full attention on what the cause was being used to to do. Children watching in 2015 mostly howled at the sunglasses and the bedlam. The deeper lessons seeped in slowly, the way the show's finest lessons always do. A kid who grew up on this episode walked away with a quiet ability to look straight past the pretty words a movement uses to describe itself and watch what it actually does to real people. Kindness printed on the label is no promise of kindness in the hand. That generation grew up into a world where being mobbed and shamed by a crowd online became an ordinary daily event, and a good many of them carried this episode's warning along with them. The warning that the person shouting loudest about protecting others is sometimes just the newest bully, gripping the newest excuse. The pattern that has run through every single case so far shows up here yet again, simply wearing a fresh disguise. The trend on the surface, the 2015 fight over correct speech, is only the costume. The thing the show is truly reaching for runs far older than any movement ever could. The deep human love of controlling other people and forcing them to fall in line, and the warm pleasure that comes from being the one who holds the power to punish. The first case was about needing others to watch you be good. This one is about needing the power to make others behave, which is that very same hunger grown a full set of teeth. PC Principal is the smug man from that opening episode, the one who cruised around feeling better than his neighbors, grown into something far more dangerous. A man who no longer merely feels superior and now enforces that feeling with his fists. Different decade, different cause, the same engine churning underneath. And once more, the show lands squarely on its hardest truth, the one it keeps returning to like a sore tooth. A person can be pressured into saying absolutely anything out loud, while believing none of it on the inside. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The town learned how to police what people said to each other out in the open. The next case, pulled from this very same season, looks at what people started doing once they grew tired of hearing anything they did not like at all. It follows the strange, deeply modern wish to build a wall around oneself. A wall designed to let every kind word flow in while blocking every harsh one out, until a person can drift through their whole life hearing nothing but applause. Section 6. The Room Where Nothing Hurts. By 2015, almost everyone lived part of their life out in the open. Social media had turned ordinary people into something close to public figures, each one posting their face and their thoughts and their meals and their moods for strangers all over the world to judge. Right alongside that change grew a new idea, the safe space, a place built on purpose to keep out anything upsetting or offensive, where a person would never have to bump into a thought that hurt. The bigger push behind it was the wish to shield people from criticism altogether, to make sure no one ever had to feel bad. South Park, deep into its 19th season and its long string of episodes about being politically correct, walked straight up to that wish and pressed hard on it. The episode is called Safe Space, and it first aired on October 21st, 2015. It is one of the bleakest things the show has ever made, and like the photo editing episode before it, it refuses to hand anyone a happy ending. The whole thing kicks off with Cartman doing something perfectly ordinary for the time. He poses in the locker room in his underwear, certain that he looks muscular and impressive, has another kid snap a photo, and posts it online for the world to admire. The world does not admire it. He wakes the next morning to a pile of comments calling him fat. Cartman, who hands out cruelty to everyone around him without a second thought, falls completely to pieces the instant a little of it comes back his way. He runs crying to PC Principal, the new head of the school, who declares that he will not tolerate body shaming on his watch. The fix that PC Principal lands on is the heart of the episode. Rather than tell Cartman to simply stop reading the comments or to get off social media entirely, he decides that someone should go through Cartman's accounts, delete every mean comment, and hand him only the kind ones printed out on paper so that Cartman only ever sees praise. He needs a student to do the deleting. He asks Kyle and Wendy first. Both of them refuse, with Kyle pointing out the obvious solution, which is that Cartman could just log off, and both of them take 2 weeks of detention rather than take part. Butters is the one who finally agrees, and only because his parents would ground him if he came home with detention. So sweet, soft Butters becomes the boy whose job is to stand between Cartman and the truth. A second story runs right beside this one. At a fancy grocery store, Randy keeps getting cornered by a cashier who pressures him again and again to donate $1 to feed starving children, embarrassing him in front of the whole checkout line and even over the store loudspeaker when he hesitates. Randy decides this too is a kind of cruelty, a thing he names charity shaming, and he sets out to fight it. The show is quietly lining up two versions of the same wish. One man wants to be protected from mean comments. Another wants to be protected from feeling guilty. Both of them want a wall built around around their feelings. Butters' job, meanwhile, balloons out of control. Word spreads that there is a kid who will scrub your accounts clean of anything hurtful. And soon, the famous come calling. A washed-up action movie star shows up to give a lecture claiming that he too has been a victim of body shaming. A pop singer wants the same service. The list grows and grows. A parade of celebrities who cannot bear to read a single unkind word about themselves. Until Butters is staying awake through the night, every night, alone, scrolling through thousands and thousands of the nastiest things human beings type at one another, deleting them one by one so that none of it ever reaches the people he is protecting. He is absorbing all of it himself. To celebrate their new shielded world, Cartman, Randy, and the others break into a song, shown in a music video where the most easily wounded people in town sit safe and smiling inside little boxes made of bulletproof glass, protected from every harsh word. And the song introduces a villain. The show takes the whole idea of harsh truth and turns it into an actual character, a man it simply names Reality. He is drawn as an old-fashioned, mustache-twirling bad guy from 100 years ago, sneering and sinister, and his evil plan is to break into everyone's little glass boxes and force them to face the hard, unpleasant facts of the world. In the logic of the episode, the truth itself has become the monster. The two stories begin to braid together as a movement forms. A group of the shamed and the sensitive, led by a pop singer and Randy among others, launch a campaign they call Shameless America, with the goal of ending all online shaming everywhere, so that no citizen would ever again be criticized for anything they did or were. The cause picks up celebrity backers and a glittering charity dinner. The wall around the country's feelings is going up brick by brick, and then the cost comes due, in the person who never asked for any of this. Butters, hollowed out by endless sleepless nights and a constant flood of pure human cruelty pouring through him, begins to break apart. He starts seeing reality everywhere he looks, certain the figure is hunting him. At school, he loses his grip completely, and in the middle of his collapse, he goes out a window and ends up seriously hurt, rushed away to the hospital. The gentlest kid in the whole show is the one who shatters, because he is the one who had to swallow all the poison everyone else was too fragile to taste. The people sitting safe in their glass boxes never feel a thing. The boy holding the wall up feels all of it until it crushes him. At the grand charity dinner, with the famous and the wealthy gathered to congratulate themselves on their fight against meanness, Reality finally breaks in. He climbs onto the stage and tells the entire room the truth to their faces. He calls them thin-skinned. He tells them, plainly, that the world is not a soft and gentle place that owes anyone constant comfort, that putting yourself out in public means accepting that some people will not like what they see, and that hiding from every hard word is no way for a grown person to live. He is the one character in the episode saying something true, and the room cannot stand it. What the town does next is the image the whole episode is built to deliver. Faced with a man who will not stop telling them difficult truths, the citizens of South Park decide to kill him. They build a gallows in the town center and publicly hang Reality, with poor broken Butters made to pull the lever while the whole crowd cheers. The harsh truth has been silenced for good, or so they believe. And as a final touch, the movement announces its grand solution to the problem of Butters working himself half to death. They will buy iPads for starving children in poor countries so that those children can spend their days filtering the mean comments off of everyone's accounts instead. The burden of facing cruelty gets shipped overseas and dumped onto the most powerless people on Earth so that the comfortable can stay comfortable. On that note, the episode ends. The thing the show is truly angry at sits just under all of this, and it has very little to do with social media itself. The real target is the wish to be protected from every hard thing, to hear only praise, to wall off criticism and pain and difficult truth until life becomes one long warm bath of approval. The episode makes two brutal points about that wish. The first is that someone always has to carry the weight a person refuses to carry themselves, and that someone usually ends up being the kindest and weakest person in reach. The way Butters ends up broken so that loud, cruel Cartman can feel good about himself. The second point is even sharper. A person can silence the truth. They can shout it down, delete it, even hang it from a rope in the town square. None of that makes the truth go away. Reality is not a man who can really be killed. He is simply the world as it actually is. And refusing to look at him does not change a single thing about him. It only leaves a person blind. This lands as the same wound the show keeps pressing on season after season. In the photo editing episode, Wendy knew the truth and edited herself anyway. In the previous episode of this very season, Kyle knew his own honest opinion and recited the opposite of it to make the harassment stop. Here, a whole town agrees that the truth is the enemy and puts it to death in front of a cheering crowd. Each time, the show watches people choose a soft, comfortable lie over a hard, useful truth, and each time it makes clear that the choice costs them something they will not get back. The way the episode is built drives all of this home. Casting the truth as the villain, mustache and all, is a small move that carries enormous weight, because it shows exactly how the people in the story see the world. To them, the man pointing out hard facts really is the bad guy, and they are the heroes for silencing him. The image of the bulletproof glass boxes turns an invisible wish into something a person can see, a row of grown adults sitting inside little clear cells, smiling, safe, and completely cut off from anything real. And the choice to take Butters, the most harmless and good-natured character the show has, and grind him down into a hospital bed is what gives the episode its sting. The story could have broken a cruel character and called it justice. Breaking the sweet one instead is what makes the point land. What lets the episode dig so deep is that the urge it describes is so easy to understand. Criticism hurts. Being disliked hurts. The wish to avoid that pain is one of the most natural wishes a person has. The trouble is what happens when that wish gets everything it wants. A person who has filtered out every hard word slowly loses the ability to know themselves at all, because all the information that might help them grow has been deleted before it ever arrived. A world of nothing but praise does not make a person stronger. It makes them more fragile, more easily wounded by the smallest scratch, until a single unkind comment can send them crying to a principal the way it sends Cartman. The wall meant to protect the soft heart inside ends up being the very thing that keeps it soft. The timing was exact, as it so often is with this show. The episode arrived right as the idea of the safe space was spreading across the culture, as people were beginning to build their online worlds into places where only friendly voices ever reached them, and as celebrities and ordinary users alike were learning to block, mute, and delete anything that stung. South Park caught the whole thing as it was forming, and it predicted something that would only become clear years later. The job Butters is forced to do, sitting alone night after night absorbing the worst things people say so that others never have to see them, turned out to be a real job. Real human beings are paid to look at the ugliest material the internet produces and scrub it away, and many of them are left damaged by it, worn down in exactly the way the show wore Butters down. The cartoon saw the cost of the clean, comfortable feed before most people even understood there was a cost. Children watching in 2015 mostly laughed at Cartman crying over his gym photo. The deeper lessons settled in slowly, the way the show's best lessons do. A kid who grew up on this episode walked into a world where building a wall around your own feelings became as easy as tapping a button, where a person could arrange their entire day to reflect back only what they already wanted to hear. The episode handed that generation a quiet warning to carry along with them. Comfort has a price. The truth does not disappear just because a person stops looking at it, and the wall built to keep out every hard thing tends to keep the builder small. The pattern that is run through every case so far steps forward here once more, simply dressed in fresh clothes. The trend on the surface, the safe space and the filtered feed and the campaign against all criticism, is only the costume. The thing the show is truly reaching for runs far older than any app. The deep human flinch away from pain and criticism, and the lengths people will go to in order to never feel the sting of an unkind truth. The first case was about needing others to watch you be good. This one is about needing the whole world to be gentle, and being willing to break the kindest person around and silence the truth itself to get it. Different decade, different cause, the same engine humming underneath. And one more time the show lands on the wound it cannot stop returning to. The human habit of picking the warm lie over the cold fact, no matter who has to pay for it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The people in this story tried to wall the hard world out and hear only soft and pleasant things. The next case looks at where a frightened, tired population turns when the present feels like too much to bear. It follows the sweet, comforting pull of the past, the longing for a time when everything felt simpler and safer, and the quiet figure online who learns exactly how to use that longing to set an entire town against itself. Section 7. The sweet taste of the good old days. By 2016, the country felt tired, tense, and angry. A bitter election was tearing through every dinner table and every feed. The internet had turned into a place where strangers tore each other apart for sport, and a powerful new feeling was sweeping the land, a longing for some better, simpler time that supposedly used to exist. South Park did something it had never done before to capture all of it. For its 20th season, the show stopped telling a fresh standalone story each week and instead told one long continuous story story across the whole season, reacting to the chaos of that year almost as it happened. The first chapter, the episode called Member Berries, aired on September 14th, 2016, just weeks before the country went to vote. It reaches for two things at once: the warm, comforting pull of the past and the quiet cruelty of the person hiding behind a screen. The story opens at a school sporting event where the girls of South Park Elementary refuse to stand during the national anthem. They are protesting, and their protest is aimed at a vicious internet troll who has been tormenting them online. In plain terms, a troll is a person who goes onto the internet to upset and hurt others on purpose, usually hiding behind a fake name so no one can tell who they really are. This particular troll calls himself SkankHunt42, and he has been posting cruel, ugly things about the girls on the school message boards. Their sit-down protest mirrors a real and famous one happening at the time, when an athlete knelt during the anthem to make a point, and the whole country argued about it for months. In the episode, the townspeople pack the stands not to watch the game at all, but to see how many of the players will stay seated, and Randy has even placed a bet on the number. Suspicion for the trolling lands on the obvious target. Kyle and the girls are sure that Cartman, the meanest kid in school, must be SkankHunt42, but they cannot prove it. Cartman denies it, and then does a spectacularly bad job of clearing his name. He throws together a stunt where he pretends to champion the girls, putting on a phony act of supporting women while secretly mocking them, and then claims the girls attacked him so he can play the victim. The girls, for their part, begin holding every single boy responsible for the troll's behavior, even the boys who openly hate what the troll is doing. The school slides toward an all-out war between the boys and the girls, and nobody can find the real culprit. The trouble grows so loud that it reaches the government. In Washington, Congress decides that the national anthem itself is the problem, that the old song has somehow caused all this division by giving people something to protest. Their solution is to give the anthem a reboot, a brand new, updated version, the same way Hollywood takes an old beloved movie and remakes it for today. And there is only one man famous enough for the job, a real director known across the world for remaking old films, J.J. Abrams. The show draws him as a strange recluse who answers questions by flicking a light on or off. When he finally delivers his updated anthem, it turns out to be the exact same song as before, note for note, with one single change. People are no longer required to stand for it. The joke is sharp and quiet. The reboot is just the old thing handed back with a fresh coat of paint, and by making standing optional, it quietly erases the protest altogether, because a person cannot protest a rule that no longer exists. Running through the middle of all this is the campaign of Mr. Garrison, the boys' old teacher, who is running for president in a way clearly built to mirror a real candidate of that year. Garrison wins crowds over by saying the most shocking and cruel things he can think of, promising awful things, insulting whole groups of people, and the strangest thing keeps happening. The worse he behaves, the more the public loves him. Somewhere along the way, Garrison makes a horrifying discovery about himself and his country. Every time he does something terrible, people get even more excited about him, and he realizes, with real dread, that he might actually win, which is the one thing he never wanted. He cannot quit without looking like a coward, so he hatches a plan to finally make everyone hate him by refusing to stand for the new anthem. The plan falls apart because the rebooted anthem lets anyone sit, stand, or kneel however they please, so there is nothing left to make people angry. Garrison is trapped on a train he cannot get off, carried toward a victory he is terrified of, simply because shamelessness keeps getting rewarded. And then there are the berries. Scattered through the whole episode, growing in importance, are the member berries. They look like a small bunch of grapes, except each little berry has a tiny face and a tiny voice. When a person squeezes them or eats them, the berries begin to talk, and what they talk about is the past. They remind people of old movies and old characters everyone loved, cooing softly about a furry creature from a famous space film, about an old TV hero, about all the cozy things from years gone by. The feeling this gives people is warm and wonderful, a soft, happy rush, and the townsfolk quickly grow hooked on it. Randy gets pulled in like everyone else, lying back and letting the berries wash that good feeling over him. Then, in the middle of the cozy reminiscing, the berries slip in something else. Without changing their gentle, happy tone, they start murmuring about remembering when there were fewer immigrants around, remembering when marriage was only ever between a man and a woman, remembering feeling safe, remembering a time before certain frightening things existed. Randy sits up in shock when he catches what they are really saying. The warm bath of nostalgia has quietly turned into something poisonous, and most people are too comfortable to notice. The episode saves its sharpest punch for the very last moment. All season, the audience, like Kyle, has been led to believe the troll SkankHunt42 must be Cartman, the obvious monster. The final shot pulls back from Kyle, who is busy swearing to hunt down and destroy the troll, and drifts down the hallway to another room, where Kyle's own father, Gerald, a grown, respectable man, pours himself a glass of wine, puts on some soft classical music, settles in at his computer, and logs in under the name Skank Hunt 42. The troll tormenting these little girls is not a cartoon villain or a basement-dwelling stranger. He is a normal, comfortable dad sitting in a nice house doing it for fun, and his own son has just promised to track him down. The thing the show is truly reaching for sits under both halves of the story. One half is about nostalgia, that warm longing for the past, and the show makes a frightening argument about it. Nostalgia is a feeling, not a fact. It is a soft chemical glow that comes from remembering a time that has been sanded smooth in the memory, with all the bad parts quietly forgotten, and a feeling that good can be steered. The berries start with harmless things everyone loves, get people hooked on the comfort, and then point that same warm glow at fear and resentment of others, all without changing their gentle voice. The danger the show names is that a frightened, tired population reaching backward for a cozy past becomes incredibly easy to lead, because they are chasing a feeling and will follow it wherever it goes, even somewhere ugly, without ever noticing the turn. The other half is about the troll, and the reveal of Gerald is the whole point of it. The cruel, anonymous voice online, the show argues, is not some distant freak who lives apart from normal society. It is the ordinary person next door, the respectable dad with the wine and the classical music, set free to be his worst self because a fake name means no one will ever know it was him. Strip away the consequences, hand a regular person a mask, and a surprising number of them will discover that they enjoy being cruel. The horror of the ending is not that a monster was trolling those girls. The horror is that it was someone's father, someone perfectly normal, someone who could be anyone. This connects back to the very first case in a way that rewards anyone paying close attention. Gerald the troll is the same Gerald who, a full 10 seasons earlier, bought the fancy hybrid car and drove around town with his eyes closed, certain he was a better person than all his neighbors. The smug man who needed everyone to see how good he was has become the anonymous man who torments children for sport behind a false name. The show has been quietly building him for years into a portrait of a certain kind of person, the respectable adult with a rotten secret self, and this episode pays it off. The same engine that ran the smug man is running the troll. Both are about a person feeding something ugly inside themselves while keeping their public face clean. The way the episode is built makes all of this land. Turning nostalgia into actual little talking berries you can get addicted to is the kind of move only this show would make, and it works because it takes an invisible feeling and gives it a body, a voice, and a slow creeping spread across the whole town. Letting the berries keep their sweet, gentle tone even as their words curdle is what makes them frightening, because that is exactly how the real thing works, never announcing the moment it turns. The reboot of the anthem rhymes with the berries perfectly, since both are about dressing up an old thing as something new and selling people the warm, familiar feeling. And the choice to make the troll the respectable father rather than the obvious bully is what gives the ending its chill, because it refuses to let the audience point at a monster and feel safe. What lets the episode reach so deep is that both urges it describes live in nearly everyone. The pull of the past is one of the most human feelings there is. The past feels safe for a simple reason, which is that a person already survived it, and memory tends to polish it smooth and quietly delete the parts that hurt. When the present feels frightening and confusing, that polished past becomes a place to hide, a warm room in the mind where nothing bad ever happened. The trouble is that the room is not real, and a person desperate enough for its comfort can be led almost anywhere by whoever promises to take them back there. The urge to troll comes from a different but equally common place. Most people behave partly because they know others are watching and will judge them. Remove the watching, hand them a mask, and the restraints loosen, and some quiet, mean thing that was always there gets to come out and play. The timing, as always with this show, was exact. The episode landed in the thick of an election built almost entirely on the promise of returning to a greater past, in a year drowning in remakes and reboots of old films and shows. While the internet filled up with anonymous cruelty and the country split into furious camps, South Park caught the whole storm at its peak and named the feeling underneath it. The Little Berries became a famous shorthand, a quick way for people to point at nostalgia being used as a weapon. And the show's argument about the troll only grew truer with time, as the world slowly learned, over and over, that the ugliest voices online very often belonged to ordinary, respectable people that no one would ever have suspected. Children watching in 2016 mostly laughed at the silly talking berries and the goofy version of the famous director. The deeper lessons settled in slowly, the way the show's lessons always do. A kid who grew up on this episode walked into a world flooded with reboots, drenched in nostalgia and crawling with anonymous cruelty, and carried two quiet warnings along with them. One was to be suspicious of the cozy past feeling, because something selling that feeling might be steering it somewhere dark. The other was to remember that the cruel stranger online could be anyone at all, even a calm and respectable person they knew and trusted. The pattern that has run through every case so far steps forward here once more, simply dressed in new clothes. The trends on the surface, the nostalgia craze and the troll wars and the circus of that election, are only the costume. The things the show is truly reaching for run far older than any of it. One is the deep human flinch away from a hard present and into the comfort of an imagined past. A comfort so sweet that people will follow it straight into fear and hate without noticing. The other is the cruelty that ordinary people let loose the moment a mask sets them free from consequences. The earlier case was about people walling out the hard truths of the present. This one is about where those same frightened people run once the walls are up, backward, into a cozy past that never quite existed, while a normal man in a nice house quietly poisons the world for fun. Different year, different trends, the same engine humming underneath. The berries simply make the comfort impossible to resist, and the troll makes the cruelty impossible to pin on a monster, because it was never a monster to begin with. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The people in this story reached backward, into a warm and comforting past, to escape a present they could not handle. The next case looks at what happens when people reach in the opposite direction instead, toward a brand new machine that promises to take the hardest parts of being a person off their hands entirely, offering to do their thinking, their writing, and even their feeling for them, so that they never have to do the difficult work themselves again. Section 8. The machine that did the caring. At the very end of 2022, a new kind of program quietly went live, and the world has not been the same since. ChatGPT was a free app where a person could type any request, and a machine would instantly write back whatever they asked for, in clear human-sounding words. An essay, an email, a love letter, a joke, a lie, all of it produced in a few seconds. Within weeks, it was everywhere. Schools panicked about students cheating. Grown adults began quietly using it for their jobs and their personal messages. South Park moved faster than almost anyone, putting out an episode about the thing only a few months after it appeared. Deep Learning aired on March 8th, 2023, the fourth episode of the show's 26th season. It is about what happens when a person decides to hand the hardest parts of being human over to a machine, and it pulls off a trick that no other episode on this list even attempts. The story starts with texting. BB is showing off the sweet romantic messages her boyfriend Clyde sends her, and all the girls melt over how thoughtful he is. Wendy, watching this, feels low because her own boyfriend, Stan, only ever answers her texts with a single thumbs up. Stan feels bad about hurting her, so he goes to Clyde and asks how he writes such lovely things. Clyde lets him in on the secret. He does not write them at all. He types BB's messages into the new app, the machine spits out the perfect romantic reply, and he sends it. Clyde warns him to keep quiet about it, and Stan starts doing the exact same thing with Wendy. What Stan does with it is the dark heart of the episode. He stops paying attention to Wendy entirely. He lets the machine read her messages and write his answers while he wanders off to play and goof around, allowing the app to carry on a long, loving, heartfelt conversation with his girlfriend without him reading a single word of any of it. Wendy is overjoyed. This new Stan seems thoughtful and deep and caring in a way he has never once been before. The catch comes when the two of them meet face to face, because Wendy wants to talk about the very thing Stan supposedly wrote to her, and Stan has no idea what any of it said. He never read it. The machine has been doing all the caring, and Stan has been somewhere else the entire time. The machine also lies. At one point, the app, trying to comfort Wendy, tells her that a painful thing from her past had also happened to Stan, and spins a completely made-up story about Stan surviving a boating accident far from home. None of it ever happened. The program simply invented a sad, touching tale because a sad, touching tale was what the moment seemed to call for, and it delivered that lie in the same warm, confident voice it used for everything else. The cheating spreads, meanwhile, all through the school. The boys, Stan and Clyde and Cartman and Butters, all start using the same app to write their homework essays. Their teacher, Mr. Garrison, hands back a stack of papers and is floored by how good they suddenly are. Even Butters and Cartman, who normally turn in weak work, have produced long, detailed essays on world history. Stan instantly understands what is going on, and the boys huddle in the bathroom in a panic. Certain Garrison will catch them if too many kids start using the app at the same time. Things curdle further at Garrison's house. He complains to his boyfriend Rick that he is bored out of his skull reading all these unexpectedly long and detailed essays. Secretly flattered, sure it must be proof of his wonderful teaching, Rick gently tries to point out that the students are probably using the new machine to write them. Garrison misses the point completely and instead lands on a different idea altogether. He can use the same machine to grade the papers. So now a machine is writing the essays and a machine is grading them, and the human beings on both ends have quietly removed themselves from the entire thing. To top it off, Garrison never once realizes that Rick has been using the very same app to write all of his sweet, supportive texts back to him. Panic sets in across the whole school, and they hire a company that claims it can sniff out machine-written work. The detector shows up in the strangest form imaginable. A man dressed as an old-fashioned falcon hunter, carrying a trained falcon named Shadowbane that supposedly hunts down writing made by the machine. The falcon points the blame straight at Wendy because her phone is stuffed with machine-written messages, all of them from Stan, who has been texting her with the app this whole time. So Wendy, the single person in the story who did absolutely nothing wrong, gets accused of cheating, cut off from everyone, locked away alone in the school library, and even threatened with arrest, while she insists, completely truthfully, that she never used the app once. The innocent person takes the fall for the machine's work. Stan, watching the girl he supposedly loves get blamed for his own laziness, cannot think of any way to fix the mess, so he does the only thing he knows how to do anymore. He asks the machine to fix it for him. He types in a request for the app to write a story that ends happily, one where Stan convinces everyone that it is perfectly fine that he lied, and argues that the giant companies who own and profit from this technology should not be the ones who get to decide what is right and wrong about it. And here is where the episode does the thing that makes it special. The entire rest of the show simply becomes that machine-written story. The audience sits and watches the machine's own version of how a South Park episode ought to end. And the machine's version sounds exactly like a South Park episode, a lazy one. It is suspiciously neat and far too tidy. It hits every beat the show has leaned on 1,000 times before. Cartman tossing off an insult, Stan delivering a big heartfelt speech, an old catchphrase from Mr. Mackey dusted off and wheeled back out. The machine, asked to write South Park, produced a smooth, hollow imitation of South Park, and the show aired that imitation on purpose to make a point about itself. Then, to drive the whole thing all the way home, the closing credits list the writers of the episode as Trey Parker and The Machine, with even the machine's spoken voice in the episode made by another piece of voice-generating software. The creators handed a piece of their own job to the program and printed its name right there beside the man's. Stan's stated lesson near the end is that sometimes a plain thumbs up from a real human being is worth more than a beautiful lie written by a machine. It sounds wise and warm. The very last beat quietly tips it over. When Clyde asks Stan how on earth he managed to untangle the whole disaster, Stan just shrugs and tells him it was the app. He escaped the mess the machine made by reaching for the machine one more time, and Wendy still has no idea of the truth. The episode flatly refuses to tell the audience whether she ever finds out, or whether she would even care if she did. The thing the show is truly reaching for sits beneath all the jokes about homework and falcons. The real target is the deep human wish to skip the hard work of being a person, the thinking, the writing, the paying attention, the actual caring, and to let something else do all of it while still collecting the reward at the end. Stan wants Wendy to feel loved without doing the work of loving her. The boys want good grades without learning anything. Garrison wants well-graded papers without grading them. Every single one of them reaches for the same shortcut, and the shortcut works, at least for a while, which is the exact thing that makes it so dangerous. The deeper and more unsettling point is about the fake closeness itself. Wendy feels genuinely cared for. The texts move her, comfort her, make her happy, and not one of them came from Stan. The warmth she feels is completely real, even though the thing producing it is empty, which raises a question the episode is brave enough to leave hanging in the air. If a fake feeling is good enough to fool the person receiving it, if the machine's love letter lands just as softly as a true one would, then does the difference between real and fake even matter anymore? The show does not answer. It simply lets the question sit there, glowing, while Stan strolls off having gotten away with everything. And then comes the bravest move of all, the way the show turns the knife on its own throat. Most of these episodes point the finger at somebody else, at gamers, at Apple, at the smug, at the trolls. This one points it squarely at its own creators. By letting a machine write its ending, and then openly admitting that the result passed as a real episode, the show confesses that the danger it is describing does not stop at school kids and lazy boyfriends. It it reaches the writer's room too. If a machine can fake South Park well enough to broadcast on television, then nobody is safe from the question of how much of their own work could be faked, and how much of it was ever as special as they had believed. The shape of the episode is the cleverest thing about it, and it only works because the show commits to it completely. Building a story about a machine doing people's work, and then handing that very machine the job of finishing the story, turns the whole episode into a living example of its own warning. The deliberately too smooth, cliche-stuffed ending is the proof of the point, placed there on purpose for everyone to see. The Falcon Hunter is a perfect little joke because it shows people meeting a brand new kind of problem with a ridiculous old-fashioned tool, flailing around because they have no real idea how to catch a machine. Even the dizzy loop of Garrison using the machine to grade machine-written essays, while his boyfriend uses the machine to text him, paints a picture of a world where the humans have all quietly stepped out of the room and left their machines chatting away to one another. What makes the episode dig so deep is that the temptation it describes is nearly impossible to resist. Effort is hard. Thinking is hard. Sitting down to write something true to another person is hard. And here is a thing that will do every bit of it instantly, for free, and do it well enough that no one can tell the difference. The pull of that is enormous, because the reward stays exactly the same while the work shrinks to nothing. The danger hides inside what gets lost along the way. The skills a person never practices because the machine handled them never grow. The closeness a person never actually builds because the machine faked it never becomes real. A person can hand off the hard parts of being human for so long that they slowly forget how to do them at all, and never notice the quiet moment the ability slipped away. The timing was almost unbelievably fast. The machine the episode is about had only existed for a few months when the episode aired, and the show had already nailed exactly how people would end up using it. For homework, for work emails, for texting the people they love. Schools really were panicking about cheating. People really were quietly letting the machine write things they used to write for themselves. The episode caught the very first months of a change that would only keep growing, and it asked the hard questions almost before anyone else had thought to ask them. Who really owns these machines? Can a person still tell the real from the fake? And what happens to people who slowly stop doing their own thinking? Kids who watched in 2023 mostly laughed at the Falcon and at Stan texting while completely ignoring his girlfriend. The deeper lesson is one their whole generation would have to live out for themselves. They are the first group of human beings to grow up with a machine that can do their thinking for them on demand, and the episode handed them an early warning about the price of it. The easy path, letting the machine write it and grade it and feel it and say it, is always right there, always tempting, and it always works in the short run. What it quietly takes in exchange is the practice and the effort and the realness that make a person who they actually are. The cartoon told them to keep an eye on what they were handing over before they handed over too much of it to get back. The pattern that has run through every single case turns up here one last time before the end, simply wearing the newest costume of them all. The trend on the surface, the sudden arrival of a machine that can write anything at all, is only the costume. The thing the show is truly reaching for runs far older than any computer. The deep human urge to dodge hard work and pocket the reward anyway, and the willingness to take a comforting fake in place of a harder, real thing. The boys who poured months into a video game at least wanted to reach a finish line. Stan wants the opposite, to land at the finish line, a happy girlfriend and good grades, without taking a single step to get there. The man who clicked agree on the fine print handed his power to a giant company, and here the show points out that this powerful new machine is owned by a small handful of giant companies too. The girl who edited her own photo faked herself to be wanted, and here a boy fakes his entire self, letting a machine be the loving person he cannot be bothered to become. Different decade, different machine, the same engine humming away underneath all of it. And this time the show slips in its sharpest and most honest note yet, by admitting that the people doing the pointing, the writers themselves, are not one bit safe from the very thing they are warning everyone else about. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Every case so far has watched the show take aim at the people, at gamers and shoppers and trolls and lazy boyfriends, at the small everyday weaknesses tucked away inside ordinary lives. The final case is something else entirely. It watches the show swing around and point its weapon at the most powerful target it has ever dared to take on, the people who actually run the country. And it does so with such force that the real government, out in the real world, fires back. Section 9. The joke the White House answered. In the summer of 2025, South Park came back from a long break, and it came back swinging at the most powerful person in the country. The show had been off the air for a while, while, with no new episodes since 2023, and just a day or two before the premiere, its creators, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, had signed an enormous new deal with Paramount, the giant company that owns the channel the show airs on, worth around $1.5 billion for dozens of fresh episodes. The very first thing the show did with that deal was turn around and attack Paramount itself, along with the President of the United States. The episode is called Sermon on the Mount, a title that doubles as a sly little pun on the word Paramount. It aired on July 23, 2025. Every case before this one watched the show poke at ordinary people and the small, hidden weaknesses tucked inside their lives. This one is the show aiming straight up at power itself. The story opens with Cartman making a horrifying discovery. His favorite radio station, a public station known for serious news and left-leaning voices, has been shut down by the president. Cartman is crushed, though for his own twisted reasons, since he mostly loved listening to people complain. That cancellation is the first sign that the whole country has quietly shifted. Signs have gone up on public bathrooms to keep certain people out. The mood of the entire town has flipped. The biggest flip of all belongs to a familiar face. PC Principal, the loud, aggressive enforcer of political correctness from years earlier, the same man who once beat a child into a hospital bed in the name of sensitivity, is no longer pushing any of that. He has switched sides completely. He even kept the same initials, except now the letters stand for Power Christian instead of politically correct. His new mission is to save the children from what he calls wokeness, a word people use, often as an insult, for being deeply focused on social justice and correct behavior. Unsure exactly how to do it, the same principal who once worshipped sensitivity decides to bring Jesus Christ himself, a character who has appeared on the show for decades, right into the public school to set the kids straight. It goes far past one school. The government is forcing Christianity into public schools all across the country, and a newscaster reports that the president has declared the spirit of Jesus important to the nation, and that he will sue anyone who dares disagree with him. In a local bar, the townspeople sit baffled and angry, and one of them points out that the president does not even act like a Christian himself, yet he is shoving it onto their kids. Randy and the town decide to protest. His response is the engine of the whole episode. When the town will not stop protesting, the president sues the entire town for $5 billion. Just like that, a simple disagreement becomes a threat to bankrupt every single person in South Park, and the show draws this president in a way it draws no other character. Instead of a cartoon face, it uses a real photograph of the actual president's face stuck onto a crude cartoon body, a choice that makes the mockery feel far sharper and more personal than usual. Throughout the episode, the show puts the president in a needy, troubled, abusive relationship with Satan, the devil, who has himself been a character on the show for decades. It also runs a fake public announcement showing a doctored, lifelike, naked image of the president wandering through a desert, and it mocks him in crude, personal ways over and over again. The show is reaching for every shocking tool in its kit. The very same shock it has always used, now pointed straight at the single most powerful man in the country. Woven through all of it are pointed jabs at real things happening at that exact moment. The show references the president's real lawsuit against its own parent company. It mocks the recent cancellation of a famous late-night television host known for joking about the president. It points at the growing fear that the government was leaning on companies and networks to quiet the people who criticized it. The cartoon was reaching out of the screen and grabbing the day's actual headlines. Cartman, meanwhile, sinks into a deep depression, and his reason for it is the most revealing part of his story. His whole identity, his entire act for years, was built on mocking woke culture. Now that the country has turned against wokeness from the very top down, Cartman feels he has lost his purpose, because the thing he loved to push against has suddenly vanished. The bully discovers to his horror that he needed his enemy. With nothing left to fight, he no longer knows who he is. Jesus, dragged into the school against the town's wishes, eventually returns with a dark warning, telling the people of South Park that their town may be headed for destruction if it does not fall in line. And in one of the sharpest moments in the whole thing, Jesus flatly admits that he is only there because of a lawsuit and an agreement with Paramount, the show openly naming its own company and its own deal right inside the story. In the end, the town is forced to back down. They settle with the president and are made to run friendly messages praising him. The little mountain town that dared to protest gets squeezed by money and power until it finally caves. And then the thing happened that makes this episode the perfect ending to a story about the show versus the real world. The cartoon refused to stay inside the television. The premiere pulled enormous numbers, the biggest season opening the show had managed in years, and the most talked about episode it had ever aired. And the real government, the actual White House, House fired back. A spokesperson for the president put out a statement attacking the show, saying that the very people now praising it had spent years branding it offensive and waving the program away as unoriginal and desperate. A cartoon about a small fictional town had provoked an official answer from the most powerful office in the country. The thing South Park had spent nearly 30 years doing, poking at the powerful and the foolish, had finally poked hard enough that power itself spun around and answered back. The thing the show is truly reaching for here is bigger than any one president or any single moment. Every case before this one found a small hidden weakness inside ordinary people. The need to be admired, the wish to never be criticized, the love of controlling others, the hunger to fall in line and be told what to think. This episode takes every one of those same weaknesses and shows what they look like when the person who carries them is handed real power. The need to be praised becomes the power to cancel anyone who refuses to praise. The thin skin that once just wept over mean comments becomes the power to sue a whole town into silence. The love of forcing others to fall in line becomes an actual government doing the forcing. The weaknesses themselves never changed. The amount of power sitting behind them did, and that one difference changes everything. The single sharpest idea in the episode is hiding inside PC Principal. Years ago, he was the snarling enforcer of one set of beliefs, ready to hurt anyone who stepped out of line on the side of sensitivity. Now he is the snarling enforcer of the opposite set of beliefs, ready to hurt anyone who steps out of line on the side of religion. The cause did a complete flip. The man did not. He is the very same bully who needs everyone to obey, who simply changed which flag he waves over their heads. This is the deepest thing the show has been quietly saying all along, finally said right out loud. The side a person stands on is just a costume. The impulse underneath it, the need to control everyone and crush anyone who disagrees, stays exactly the same no matter which way the wind happens to be blowing. The show also refuses to let itself off the hook. By signing a giant deal with Paramount and then mocking Paramount in the very first episode, and by having Jesus admit he is only on screen because of that deal, the show is confessing that it is now part of the same machine of money and power it is attacking. It takes the money and bites the hand at the very same time. Like the artificial intelligence episode that admitted its own writers were not safe from the thing they were warning about, this episode admits that the show itself is tangled up in the world it is mocking. There is no clean, pure place to stand and throw stones from, and the show knows it perfectly well. The choice to build the president out of a real photograph stuck on a cartoon body is the kind of small decision that carries enormous weight. Every other character, even the most famous real people the show has ever mocked, gets drawn as a cartoon. This one wears the actual man's actual face, which strips away the comfortable distance a cartoon usually gives an audience and makes the joke land like a finger pointed directly at a real person. Hiding a pun on the parent company's own name inside the episode title is another sly touch. A little flag planted to prove the show knew exactly what it was doing when it bit the hand that fed it. And flipping an old character to the opposite cause rather than inventing a brand new one is what lets the episode make its biggest point without speaking it, simply by showing the same man doing the same thing for the other team. What makes the episode reach so deep is a simple, uncomfortable truth about people and power. Power leaves a person's nature exactly as it was and merely removes the limits on it. A small, thin-skinned, controlling person, while they hold no power, can only sulk and complain and sniff their own pride. Hand that same person the ability to actually punish the people who annoy them, and the small, ugly thing curled up inside them suddenly grows teeth. The show spent decades carefully collecting the little weaknesses found in regular people, and this episode is the moment it ties all of that work to the people at the very top, arguing that they are the same flawed humans as everyone else, running on the same hungers, only with the brakes torn off. The timing, as always with the show, was razor sharp. The episode arrived right in the thick of a real intense fight over what people in the media were allowed to say, as a famous critic of the president lost his show, as the president pressed lawsuits against networks, and as plenty of people worried aloud that the government was pushing companies to muzzle their critics. South Park stepped directly into that fight. overnight, and it did so from a uniquely strange spot, having just taken more than $1 billion from one of those very companies. The result was a piece of television that felt like a live event happening inside the news itself. People watching in 2025 understood right away that they were seeing something unusual, a cartoon and a government openly trading blows out in the real world. The lesson sitting underneath, for anyone paying attention, was the same one the show had been teaching for 30 years, simply aimed at a far bigger target. Watch the powerful with the same suspicion a person would bring to a trend, an app, or a smug neighbor. Notice that the urge to control and to silence looks the same no matter who is holding it or which side they claim to march for. And be deeply wary of anyone, especially anyone gripping real power, who cannot take a joke. This is where the whole long argument of the show finally snaps into focus. The trend on the surface, the heated politics of 2025, is only the costume, the same as every trend that came before it. The thing the show is truly reaching for is the oldest thing of all, the small set of human weaknesses it has been quietly mapping for nearly 30 years. The need to be praised, the need to control, the terror of criticism, the warm comfort of falling in line. The smug man who needed to be seen as good is here, except now he can sue. The bully who forced everyone to obey is here, except now he runs the schools and the country. The thin-skinned crowd that could not survive a mean comment is here, except now they can cancel and silence and threaten. Every weakness the show ever found in an ordinary person is gathered together in this one episode and handed real power, and the show simply watches what happens. The same engine that ran every earlier case is running this one too, only now on the biggest stage there is, with the highest stakes there have ever been. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. 9 cases spread across nearly 20 years, from a man smug about his car to a government suing a town into silence. Through every one of them, the show kept its eye trained on the same small, stubborn truths about people, dressing them up in whatever costume the moment happened to be wearing. What all of it finally adds up to, what nearly 30 years of pointing at the same handful of human weaknesses has truly been trying to say, is the one thing left to put together now. Section 10, the mirror they were holding up. The title of this whole journey was South Park versus Modern Society. After 9 cases, stretched across nearly 20 years, the real shape of that fight finally comes clear. The show was holding up a mirror the entire time. Every trend it went after, the smug car, the all-consuming game, the fine print nobody reads, the edited photos, the rules about speech, the rooms built to shut out criticism, the comforting berries, the machine that writes your life for you, the president suing a town. Every single one of them was only the costume of the moment. Underneath all of them sat the same small handful of human weaknesses, unchanged the whole way through. Lay the 9 cases side by side, and the pattern is impossible to miss. A man needs everyone to see how good he is. 4 boys pour their lives into a screen that feels like winning. A boy hands away power over his own body by tapping a button without looking. A girl remakes her own face just to be wanted. A bully enforces the rules of the day with his fists. A whole town walls itself off from any hard word. A frightened people reach backward for a cozy past that never quite existed. A boy lets a machine do his thinking and his caring for him. And at the end, every one of those weaknesses gets handed real power and the brakes come off. The costumes changed every few years. The person wearing them never did. Look closer and a second, darker thread runs straight through the middle of the run. Again and again, the show watched a person who could see the truth perfectly clearly choose the comfortable lie instead, simply because the truth had been made too costly to hold on to. The girl who knew the photos were fake edited her own face anyway. The boy who knew his honest opinion stood up and recited the opposite of it to make the harassment stop. A whole town decided the truth itself was the enemy and hanged it in the town square to a cheering crowd. The show kept pressing on that exact bruise. The moment a person trades what is real for what is easy, and it never once let the trade look painless. This is the reason a crude cartoon about a foul-mouthed mountain town could keep being right for almost 30 years. Most shows that chase the headlines age badly, because the headlines move on and the jokes get stranded in a moment that has already passed. South Park kept its real aim somewhere steadier. It aimed past the trend and at the person staring at the trend. Trends are easy targets and they rot fast. Human weakness sits perfectly still and waits. The same in 2006 as in 2025, which is exactly why the oldest episodes still land as hard as the newest ones. The trend was always just the bait. The catch was always people. There is a reason all of this arrived wrapped in crude jokes and rough paper-cutout animation. The silliness was the delivery system. A serious lecture about the ways people fool themselves would have bounced right off, ignored and quickly forgotten. A cartoon about a town choking on a cloud of its own smugness, or a company building a gadget out of living people, slips that very same hard idea past every guard a person has up and leaves it sitting quietly in the back of the mind long after the laughing is stopped. The crude jokes carried the medicine, and the medicine was the part that stayed. The show was also rarely gentle about who those people in the mirror really were. The crowd laughing at the smug man with his fancy car carried the very same itch to be admired. The crowd laughing at the cruel, anonymous troll included more than a few people who had typed something nasty behind a fake name of their own. The show kept quietly catching its own audience in the glass, refusing to let anyone settle comfortably into feeling better than the fools on screen, because the fools on screen were built out of the people watching them. And the most honest move of all came at the end, when the show turned the mirror on itself, letting a machine write its own episode and biting the very company that had just handed it a fortune. The show that spent decades stripping the costume off everyone else finally pulled at its own and found the same ordinary human stuff underneath. No one gets to stand outside the mirror, the show included. What grows out of all of this is a strange sort of gift. A whole generation came up watching this thing, howling at the bedpans and the talking berries and the falcon hunting down a chatbot. And somewhere underneath the howling, they were being handed a tool. They learned, without quite noticing it happen, to look for the engine under the costume. To meet every shiny new trend, every fresh outrage, every machine that swears it will change everything, with the same quiet question. What old, familiar human thing is this really running on? To notice that the urge to control, to be praised, to hide from the truth, to fall in line, looks exactly the same no matter what fashionable outfit it happens to be wearing this particular year. The lesson sitting under 20 years of jokes turns out to be simple and a little uncomfortable. The enemy is almost never the new thing itself. The same small, stubborn weakness a person carries around inside them grabs whatever fresh costume the moment offers and wears it out into the world. And that weakness is the real culprit every time. Blaming the costume is easy, and it feels good. Looking hard at the thing wearing it is the far harder and far more useful move. And it is the exact thing the show has been quietly asking people to do since the very beginning. Which is why the work is never finished, for the show or for anyone who watched it. Somewhere right now, a brand new costume is being stitched together. A fresh thing everyone will soon rush toward. A new outrage to swarm, a new machine that promises it is nothing like the ones before it. And whenever it finally arrives, dressed up as the future, the show will be waiting to reach over and tug the costume loose and reveal the same tired, familiar, deeply human thing standing underneath, exactly the way it always has, and almost certainly always will. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.